My son told me I couldn't attend his wedding unless I signed over my house to him as a wedding gift. He actually looked me in the eye and said, "No deed, no dad" at the altar. 3 weeks later, I walked into that church with my lawyer and legal papers that would teach him the most expensive lesson of his life. Let me tell you, the look on his face when I interrupted his vows was worth every penny I'd ever spent on raising that ungrateful boy. If you've ever had family members try to manipulate you into giving them what they want, pull up a chair and grab some popcorn. I'm George Hartwell, and at 72 years old, I've learned that sometimes the best wedding gift you can give a greedy child is a reality check delivered in front of 200 witnesses. You see, I spent 43 years of marriage building a life with my Margaret in our beautiful Victorian home on Maple Street. Every weekend project, every mortgage payment, every improvement was done with love and the dream that someday we'd hand it down to our son and his family. After Margaret passed 3 years ago, that house became my sanctuary, my connection to her memory, and apparently my son's retirement plan. Marcus had been circling that house like a vulture ever since his mother's funeral. Subtle comments at first, "This place is too big for just you, Dad, and you'd be so much happier in a nice retirement community." But as his wedding date approached, the hints became demands, and the demands became ultimatums that would have made his mother ashamed to call him her son. The final confrontation came on a Tuesday evening in April. Marcus and his fiancée Brittany showed up at my door with takeout Chinese food and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. They had wedding plans to discuss, they said, and important family matters to settle. I should have known right then that I was walking into an ambush. If you enjoy stories about entitled family members getting exactly what they deserve, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I've got 72 years of experience dealing with people who mistake kindness for weakness, and trust me, the lessons I've learned are worth sharing with anyone who's tired of being taken advantage of. That Tuesday night dinner would be the last time Marcus underestimated his old man. By the time his wedding day arrived, he'd learned that threatening to exclude your father from the most important day of your life was the kind of mistake that echoes through generations. Some gifts can't be taken back, and some bridges burn beautifully when they need to. Marcus was our miracle baby, born when Margaret and I had almost given up hope of having children. We were both 38, established in our careers, and financially stable enough to give him everything we'd never had growing up. Private schools, music lessons, summer camps, college tuition paid in full. We never said no to anything that might give our boy a better life than we'd had. Maybe that was our first mistake, never teaching him that good things come to people who work for them. Marcus grew up expecting life to hand him whatever he wanted, and when it didn't, he learned to charm, manipulate, or demand his way to getting it anyway. Even as a child, he could turn on that smile and make you forget why you were saying no in the first place. When he brought Brittany home 2 years ago, I tried to be welcoming despite my reservations. She was beautiful, ambitious, and had a way of making Marcus laugh that reminded me of how Margaret used to light up my world. But there was something calculating in her eyes, a way of sizing up everything in my house, like she was already planning how to rearrange the furniture. Their relationship moved fast, too fast, Margaret would have said. Engagement after 8 months, wedding planning immediately, and suddenly every conversation somehow circled back to my house, my retirement plans, and my legacy. Brittany would walk through my rooms, touching Margaret's antiques and making comments about how vintage everything was, how much potential the place had with the right updates. The first direct request came 6 months before the wedding. Marcus sat me down in my own living room and explained how much they were struggling to afford a house in the current market. Young couples had it so much harder than my generation, he said. And wouldn't it make sense for me to move somewhere smaller while I was still healthy enough to enjoy it? I tried to explain that the house wasn't just about space or finances. It was about Margaret's garden, the kitchen where we'd cooked together for decades, the bedroom where we'd held each other through good times and bad. But Marcus had already moved past sentiment to practical matters. Property values, tax implications, how much easier it would be for them to take care of me if I lived somewhere with medical facilities nearby. When gentle persuasion didn't work, they tried guilt. How worried they were about me living alone in such a big house. How Margaret would have wanted them to be happy and settled. How selfish it was of me to hold on to so much space when they needed to start their lives together. Each conversation left me feeling smaller, more unreasonable, more like an obstacle standing between my son and his happiness. Looking back now, I can see how carefully they orchestrated every interaction, every argument, every emotional manipulation designed to wear down my resistance. They probably thought 72-year-old widowers were easy targets, too lonely and confused to stand up for themselves. They were about to learn just how wrong they were about George Hartwell. The real pressure started 3 months before the wedding, when Marcus and Brittany began showing up at my house with real estate agents and retirement community brochures. They'd made appointments without asking me, scheduled tours of places I'd never agreed to visit, and started talking about my future like I wasn't sitting right there in the room with them. "Dad, you're going to love Sunset Manor," Brittany would gush, spreading colourful pamphlets across my kitchen table. "They have bridge tournaments and craft classes, and you wouldn't have to worry about maintenance or cooking or any of that stuff. It's like a cruise ship on land. A cruise ship where I'd give up everything I'd built with Margaret so they could play house in our home." The breaking point came when I walked into my own kitchen one Tuesday morning and found a real estate agent measuring my cabinets. Apparently, Marcus had given her a key and permission to do a preliminary assessment of the property's value. The woman looked more surprised to see me than I was to see her, like I was the intruder in my own home. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, shoving her measuring tape into her purse. "Marcus said you'd be out for the morning. He wanted me to get some photos for the listing, just to see what kind of interest we might generate." The listing. They were already planning to sell my house before they'd even convinced me to give it to them. When I confronted Marcus about it that evening, he didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. "Dad, we're just trying to help you understand your options. The market is really hot right now, and if you're going to make a move anyway, timing matters." If I was going to make a move, like it was already decided, like my opinion was just a formality to get through before they could proceed with their plans. That's when Brittany chimed in with her sweetest voice and deadliest smile. "George, we know this is hard, but think about what a beautiful wedding gift it would be. Starting our marriage in the house where Marcus grew up, carrying on the family legacy in the place where you and Margaret were so happy. Isn't that what every parent wants for their children?" She made it sound so romantic, so meaningful, like giving them my house was some kind of noble sacrifice instead of legalized theft. Like I should be grateful for the opportunity to hand over everything I'd worked for so they could start their lives without the inconvenience of earning anything themselves. But then Marcus delivered the line that changed everything between us forever. "Look, Dad, we need to know where you stand on this before we finalize the wedding plans. We can't have you changing your mind at the last minute and leaving us scrambling for housing. So here's the deal. You transfer the house to us before the wedding, or we'll have to reconsider whether including you in the ceremony makes sense." Reconsider including me. In my own son's wedding, after I'd paid for his education, supported his dreams, and loved him unconditionally for 35 years. He was holding his own wedding hostage to get what he wanted, and he expected me to cave to that kind of emotional blackmail. That night, I sat alone in Margaret's favorite chair and realized I didn't recognize the man my son had become. Somewhere along the way, the little boy who used to bring me dandelions and tell me I was the best daddy in the world had turned into a stranger who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle between him and my property. The ultimatum came exactly 3 weeks before the wedding, delivered with all the warmth of a foreclosure notice. Marcus and Brittany arrived at my door on a Sunday evening with a folder full of legal documents and smiles that looked more like threats than expressions of joy. They'd been to see a lawyer, they explained, and had all the paperwork ready to make the transfer as smooth as possible. "We figured it would be easier if we handled all the legal stuff for you," Marcus said, spreading contracts across my dining room table like he was doing me some kind of favor. "You won't have to worry about any of the complicated parts. Just sign where the lawyer marked and we'll take care of everything else." Everything else, meaning taking possession of the house I'd called home for 43 years. Brittany pulled out her phone and started showing me pictures of retirement communities, like she was presenting vacation options instead of places to store inconvenient elderly relatives. "Look at this one, George. They have a beautiful dining room, and you'd never have to cook again. Plus, there's a shuttle service for doctor's appointments and shopping. It's really the perfect solution for everyone." The perfect solution for everyone, except the man who'd be giving up his home, his independence, and his connection to the woman he'd loved for half a century. But when I tried to explain that I wasn't ready to make such a drastic change, Marcus's patience finally ran out completely. "Dad, you're being ridiculous about this," he snapped, his voice taking on a tone I'd never heard from him before. "You're 72 years old, living alone in a 4-bedroom house that's too big, too expensive, and too much work for someone your age. Mom's been gone for 3 years now. It's time to let go of the past and do what makes sense." "What makes sense for who?" I asked, and that's when Brittany decided to play her trump card. "George, I think you're forgetting that Marcus is your only child," she said with a sweetness that tasted like poison. "When you're gone, the house is going to him anyway, right? So really, we're just asking you to give us our inheritance a little early, when it can actually help us start our lives together. Isn't that what loving parents do for their children?" Our inheritance. Like my home was already theirs by right, like I was just some temporary caretaker holding onto their property until they were ready to claim it. The entitlement was breathtaking, but Marcus wasn't finished yet. He leaned back in his chair and delivered the words that would haunt our relationship forever. "Here's the bottom line, Dad. Brittany and I have worked really hard to plan the perfect wedding, and we need to know that our future is secure before we take that step. If you can't support us by transferring the house, then maybe you shouldn't be part of the ceremony at all." The room went completely silent. Even Brittany looked shocked that he'd actually said it out loud, though I suspected she'd been the one whispering that ultimatum in his ear for weeks. "You're telling me I can't come to my own son's wedding unless I give you my house," I said slowly, wanting to make sure I understood the depth of his betrayal correctly. "I'm telling you that actions have consequences, Dad. We need partners in our lives, not obstacles. People who support our dreams, not people who stand in the way of our happiness." He was actually trying to make this sound reasonable, like excluding his father from the most important day of his life was some kind of tough love instead of pure greed. That night, after they left with their unsigned contracts and their threats, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my lawyer, Coleman, explaining that I needed to make some urgent changes to my estate planning. The second was to my dear friend Dorothy, telling her I might need a date to a wedding where I definitely wasn't welcome, but was planning to attend anyway. For 3 weeks after that ultimatum, Marcus and I didn't speak. No phone calls, no visits, no attempts at reconciliation from either side. He'd drawn his line in the sand, and I was drawing mine right back. The wedding invitations had already gone out with my name conspicuously absent from the parents of the groom section, which told me everything I needed to know about how serious he was about excluding me. But I was far from idle during those silent weeks. Coleman and I spent hours going through my estate planning, making sure every document was ironclad and every intention was crystal clear. I also spent time visiting retirement communities, but not the ones Brittany had recommended. I was looking at upscale places where independent seniors could live with dignity, not warehouses for inconvenient elderly relatives. The community I fell in love with was called Sunrise Gardens, a beautiful campus with individual cottages, community centers, and enough activities to keep anyone busy for the rest of their lives. Most importantly, it was a place where I could build a new life without feeling like I was being stored away until nature took its course. I put down a deposit on a cottage with a garden view and started making plans for my future. Meanwhile, Dorothy became my secret weapon and closest confidant. She'd been Margaret's best friend before becoming mine, and she understood exactly what Marcus was trying to do to me. More importantly, she agreed that someone needed to witness what I was planning to do about it. "That boy needs to learn that his parents aren't just ATM machines with legs," she said over coffee one morning. Margaret would be furious if she knew what he was trying to pull. I also spent those weeks quietly liquidating some investments and making some donations to charities that Margaret and I had always supported. The local animal shelter, the children's hospital, the scholarship fund at our church, places where our money could do some good instead of enabling entitled behavior. It felt liberating to give money to people who actually needed it instead of people who just wanted it. The strangest part was how peaceful those weeks were. Without the constant pressure from Marcus and Brittany, without their visits and phone calls and emotional manipulation, I felt lighter than I had in months. I was sleeping better, eating better, even started taking those watercolor classes Dorothy had been recommending for years. 2 days before the wedding, Marcus finally broke the silence with a phone call that was equal parts desperation and arrogance. "Dad, I really hope you've thought about what we discussed. The offer is still on the table, and there's still time to make this right before the wedding. I'd hate for you to miss the most important day of my life over something as simple as signing some papers, something as simple as giving up my home, my independence, and my self-respect." But I kept my voice calm and pleasant when I responded. "Don't worry about me missing anything important, son. I'll be exactly where I need to be on your wedding day." He must have heard something in my tone that made him nervous, because his voice got sharper. "What's that supposed to mean, Dad? Are you planning to cause some kind of scene?" "I'm planning to give you and Brittany exactly what you deserve on your special day," I told him truthfully. "The kind of wedding gift you'll never forget." And I was. Coleman had everything ready. Dorothy had picked out the perfect dress for the occasion, and I had reserved front-row seats to the most expensive lesson my son would ever receive. The morning of Marcus's wedding dawned bright and beautiful, the kind of perfect spring day that makes you believe in new beginnings. Dorothy and I arrived at St. Matthew's Episcopal Church an hour before the ceremony, giving us plenty of time to find seats with the best possible view of what was about to unfold. She looked radiant in her navy dress and pearls, every inch the distinguished lady who'd been Margaret's dearest friend. Coleman was waiting for us in the parking lot with his briefcase and the satisfied expression of a man who'd spent 40 years practicing law and knew exactly how to execute a perfect legal maneuver. "Everything's ready, George," he said quietly. "The paperwork is filed, the donations have been processed, and your cottage at Sunrise Gardens will be available for move-in next week. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" I looked up at the church, where I'd watched Marcus get baptized, confirmed, and now married, and felt a deep sense of peace wash over me. "Coleman, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. That boy needs to learn that love and respect can't be bought, sold, or held hostage for a real estate transaction." Inside the church, the atmosphere was buzzing with excitement and anticipation. 200 guests filled the pews, most of them Brittany's family and friends, who'd been treated to weeks of stories about how difficult and unreasonable the groom's father was being about helping the young couple get started. I could feel their curious stares as Dorothy and I took our seats in the third row, close enough to see everything but far enough back to make a graceful exit when the time came. Marcus looked handsome in his black tuxedo, standing at the altar with his groomsmen like he didn't have a care in the world. He'd gotten everything he wanted, a beautiful bride, a perfect wedding, and the promise of a free house once his stubborn father finally came to his senses. The only thing missing from his fairy tale was the old man's signature on a deed transfer. When Brittany appeared at the back of the church in her stunning white gown, the entire congregation rose to their feet in appreciation. She was genuinely beautiful, floating down the aisle like something out of a magazine, and I felt a moment of sadness for what this day could have been if greed hadn't poisoned everything between us. The ceremony proceeded normally through the opening prayers, the readings, and the exchange of rings. Marcus and Brittany spoke their vows with apparent sincerity, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other through all the challenges life might bring. The irony wasn't lost on me that they were pledging eternal devotion while having just spent months trying to manipulate and threaten an elderly widower out of his home. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Father Mackenzie had just pronounced them husband and wife when he paused and said, "Before we conclude today's ceremony, I understand that someone has something important to share with the happy couple." That was my cue. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 72 years in my knees, and walked to the front of the church with Coleman by my side. The murmur of confusion that rippled through the congregation was almost musical, but nothing compared to the look of absolute horror that crossed Marcus's face when he realized what was happening. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the church's excellent acoustics, "I'm George Hartwell, Marcus's father, and I have a very special wedding gift for the happy couple." The silence in that church was deafening as Coleman opened his briefcase and pulled out the legal documents that would change everything. Marcus looked like he'd seen a ghost. Brittany's face had gone white beneath her carefully applied makeup, and 200 wedding guests were about to witness the most dramatic gift presentation in St. Matthew's history. "Marcus, 3 weeks ago you told me I couldn't attend your wedding unless I signed over my house to you and Brittany," I continued, my voice steady and calm. "Well, son, I want you to know that I've taken care of the house situation once and for all." Coleman handed me the first set of papers, and I held them up for everyone to see. "These documents show that the house on Maple Street has been donated to the Sunset Manor Foundation, where it will be converted into a transitional home for elderly individuals who've been displaced by family circumstances." The gasp that went through the congregation was audible, but I wasn't finished yet. "I've also established a scholarship fund in your mother's name at the community college, funded by the sale of most of my other assets. And finally," Coleman handed me the last document, "I've purchased a beautiful cottage at Sunrise Gardens, where Dorothy and I will be very happy spending our golden years together." Marcus found his voice then, though it came out as more of a strangled whisper. "Dad, what are you doing? We can work this out. We can talk about this." "We did talk about it, son. You made your position very clear. No house, no relationship with your father. Well, congratulations. You got exactly what you asked for." I looked around at all the shocked faces staring back at us and smiled. The house is gone, donated to people who actually need it, instead of people who just want it. And as for our relationship, well, that ended the moment you decided my love could be bought and sold like a piece of property. Brittany finally found her voice, though it was shaking with rage. "You can't do this. That house was supposed to be ours. Marcus is your only son." "You're absolutely right, Brittany. Marcus is my only son, which makes his behavior even more disappointing than I thought possible. But don't worry. You two are young, healthy, and perfectly capable of buying your own house like every other married couple in America. Consider this my gift to your independence." Dorothy stood up then, radiant and dignified, and took my arm like we were leaving any other social event. "George, darling, I think our work here is done. The moving truck is coming tomorrow, and we have a lot of packing to finish." As we walked down the aisle together, I could hear Marcus calling my name, his voice breaking with what might have been genuine emotion for the first time in months. But some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt with apologies and regret. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way, and some consequences can't be undone with charm and manipulation. That was 2 years ago, and I can honestly say they've been the happiest 2 years of my life since Margaret passed. Dorothy and I have traveled to places I never thought I'd see, taken classes I never had time for, and built a community of friends who value us for who we are, not what we own. The cottage at Sunrise Gardens feels more like home than that house ever did after Marcus started circling it like a predator. Do I miss my son? Every single day. But I don't miss the manipulation, the pressure, or the feeling that my worth was measured entirely by what I could provide instead of who I was as a person. Marcus sends cards on holidays now, usually with notes about how he's learned to appreciate family and would love to rebuild our relationship. Maybe someday we will. But first, he'll have to prove that he's learned the difference between love and greed. And if this story inspired you to stand up for yourself when family members try to take advantage of your kindness, hit that subscribe button. I've got plenty more stories about learning to value yourself enough to walk away from people who don't. Remember, folks, it's never too late to choose dignity over manipulation, even when the people trying to manipulate you share your last name.